I never thought betrayal could hide in the quiet spaces of my own home. Every 3 months, he told me he had to go on a business trip for the company, a mandatory out-of-country assignment that lasted a week or more. Alexander, my father-in-law, always insisted it was important for me to trust Landon, to trust his work. And I did, at first. But that morning, the sunlight spilling across our marble floors, I felt something different. A subtle weight, like the air itself, was holding its breath. I noticed a message on his phone, briefly left unattended on the kitchen counter. A name I didn't recognize, Mia. Just the sight of it made my stomach twist. I should have ignored it. I told myself it was probably work-related, a colleague or an old friend, but something about the way his phone buzzed always when he was busy, always when Alexander's business trips were announced, planted a seed of doubt. I remember sitting in the quiet of our luxurious living room, the sunlight warming the velvet curtains, the faint scent of jasmine from the garden outside, trying to steady my heart. That was when I realized that love, that trust, could feel fragile, like crystal teetering on the edge of a table. And yet, I didn't know that by nightfall, my fragile world would shatter entirely. It started with a whisper of intuition, the kind that feels like an echo in your chest. The late-night messages, the sudden excuses, the way Landon's eyes flickered when I mentioned something as simple as Mia, I brushed it off at first. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to trust him, the man I had promised to love, the man who seemed devoted to me, even in our quiet moments in the grand halls of Alexander's mansion. But sometimes, the truth has a way of finding you, even in silence, even in shadows. And that evening, I caught him. Not just with a glance, or a doubt, or a fleeting suspicion, but with undeniable proof. He wasn't just distant. He was betraying me in the place where love should have been safest. And I, Alexa, and even Alexander, none of us could have imagined the quiet devastation that would follow. I still remember the first time I met Alexa. She was unlike anyone I had ever known, not just beautiful, but luminous, in a way that made the room feel smaller, like her presence alone could fill it. Alexander, her father, had arranged our meeting, and at first, I felt out of place. My clothes were plain, my car modest, my life simple. Everything about me seemed dwarfed by the glittering world she inhabited. Alexa, though, never made me feel small. She smiled at me with genuine warmth, her eyes curious, not condescending. "Landon," she said softly, "don't ever feel you don't belong. This world can be cold, but it can also be kind if we choose it to be." Those words lingered with me long after the night ended. Our love grew quietly, carefully, like a candle flickering against the wind. I admired her ambition, the way she could speak about business, about art, about her dreams for Mexico and beyond. She came from wealth, a life I had only glimpsed in passing, yet she treated my simplicity not as weakness, but as strength. I fell for that. I fell for her patience, her gentle humor, and the way she noticed the smallest things about me. Alexander, her father, was a different story. A man of immense power and influence. He commanded every room he entered, and his expectations were high. He had built an empire, and he wanted to protect it. At first, I feared him, feared his judgment, his sharp eyes, his quiet disapproval. But over time, we found a rhythm. He respected my honesty, my integrity, my steadfastness, even if my bank account never matched his standards. Life with Alexa was a study in contrasts. Our mornings were spent in the sunlight-filled garden of her mansion, jasmine and orange blossoms swaying in the breeze. I brewed coffee in the tiny kitchen I had once called home, and she laughed when I served it too strong. Our evenings were spent in her expansive living room, the city lights of Mexico twinkling through floor-to-ceiling windows, her piano playing soft melodies that filled the marble halls. Wealth surrounded us, yes, but the moments we shared felt intimate, real, grounded in something money could never buy. Yet, even in paradise, tension found its way in. "Landon," I reminded myself, "don't be naive. Differences in values, in expectations, in pride, have a way of creeping in unnoticed." It started with small things. Alexa's sighs when I refused to spend extravagantly, the subtle frowns when Alexander's office calls kept her away, or when I tried to surprise her with gifts she didn't need. I felt the weight of our worlds pressing against each other, gentle but persistent. And then there was Landon's side of me, the side that carried insecurity like a quiet ache. I wanted to belong in her world, to match her elegance and poise, but the more I tried, the more I feared I would fail. Mia, the schoolfellow I had met long ago, had once been a friend who made me feel seen in the ways I sometimes doubted myself. I never imagined she could become the wedge that would pierce the fragile harmony of my marriage. The city of Mexico itself seemed to mirror our lives, vibrant, beautiful, and yet full of hidden corners. The streets were alive with color, music, and laughter. But behind the gilded gates of the mansion, whispers of tension could creep in. Unnoticed at first, until they became impossible to ignore. The mansion, grand and luxurious, was a palace in which every gesture mattered, every glance was observed, every secret could feel magnified. I thought I knew everything about Landon, about our love, about the balance we had created. But in the quiet moments, while jasmine scented the air and the city lights flickered outside our windows, I began to feel the first tremors of a truth I wasn't ready to face, a truth that would soon break my heart in the softest, cruelest way possible. At first, the signs were subtle, almost imperceptible. A glance held too long at his phone, a smile that lingered at a message only he could see. I told myself it was nothing, just work, just old friends, just paranoia. But the air in our mansion began to change. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quieter than that. The silence between us grew, punctuated by polite smiles and the soft clinking of fine china at dinner. Landon had always been a loving husband, but lately his love felt like a shadow present, but not fully there. He would return from the business trips Alexander required every 3 months, exhausted and distant. His eyes, once warm and open, now darted and flickered, betraying a secret I didn't yet understand. I tried to reach him. I left notes in his briefcase, sent soft messages on his phone, and called him in the evenings when I knew he would be alone. "Landon," I whispered once into the line, my voice trembling. "Are you happy?" There was a pause. Then a sigh. Of course, Alexa, you know that. But I could hear the hesitation that felt heavier than any lie. And then Mia entered our lives, though I didn't know it at first. She was a reminder of Landon's past, someone who understood the parts of him that felt small in the grand halls of Alexander's empire. She remembered him as he once was, simple, insecure, longing to be seen. In her presence, Landon laughed more easily, shared stories he didn't tell me, and carried a warmth I hadn't felt in months. I noticed the pattern first during one of his trips. Alexander had left for a business conference in Europe, and Landon told me he would be away on company matters. But something in his tone had shifted, a lightness I had never heard. He returned a week later, with tired eyes, but a curious spark that seemed unfaithful. I found a lipstick mark on a coffee cup in the kitchen, a small but unmistakable sign. I confronted him softly. "Landon, whose is this?" He froze. For a moment, I thought he might confess, but instead, he smiled faintly, almost sheepishly. "It's nothing, Alexa, just a mistake." I was careless. I wanted to believe him. I tried to push the thought away, convincing myself that suspicion was my enemy, that love demanded trust. But the seed had been planted. And seeds, no matter how small, have a way of growing when watered with silence. The mansion itself began to feel different. The corridors, once bright and inviting, now seemed to echo with whispers I could not hear. The soft hum of air conditioning felt like the steady pulse of tension beneath the surface. Every corner held the possibility of a secret, every shadow the weight of unspoken words. Landon's visits became less predictable. He would leave early for meetings I had no business attending, return late with faint perfume clinging to his clothes. I noticed the little things, the smell of Mia's fragrance on his coat, the hurried messages he deleted before I could see them. And with every discovery, my heart sank a little further. One evening, I waited for him in the study. The sun had set, leaving the room bathed in gold and amber light. I wanted to confront him, to demand honesty, but when he entered, smiling and weary, I felt my courage falter. "Alexa," he said, his voice gentle, "you look beautiful tonight." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Landon, can we talk?" He nodded, but the conversation never came. Instead, he drifted into the stories of his trip, the clients he met, the cityscapes he admired. I listened, careful not to reveal the storm growing inside me. It wasn't just betrayal I feared. It was the loss of the man I thought I knew, the man I had chosen to share my life with. Mia's presence, though invisible to me at first, began to shape our reality. I sensed her in the details, A message that landed on his phone when he left it unattended. A name whispered during his absent-minded phone calls. Laughter that didn't include me. And yet, I held on to hope, convincing myself that love could endure even this quiet erosion. Alexander, ever perceptive, noticed the tension between us. One evening, he took me aside in the grand library of the mansion, his hands folded over a glass of amber cognac. "Alexa," he said, voice calm but firm. I've seen him slip. Not intentionally, perhaps, but every man has weaknesses. Do not ignore them. Observe and understand the truth before it breaks you. I nodded, hiding the tears that threatened to fall. His words were a balm and a warning all at once. I knew he was right. I had to watch, had to wait, had to gather the pieces of a puzzle that I wasn't yet ready to see. And then it happened. The moment that changed everything. I caught Landon and Mia together, not in fleeting messages, not in subtle hints, but in undeniable reality. The sight burned itself into my memory. Laughter whispered words, the intimacy of betrayal. My heart fractured in silence, and yet I did not scream. I did not run. I only watched, feeling the weight of love lost and the quiet awakening of a woman who would never be blind again. The day I discovered the truth, the mansion felt colder than usual. The sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows couldn't warm the marble halls. I had followed a quiet instinct, a whisper of intuition that told me Landon's absences were more than just work. It started with a simple call. A friend of mine who had seen Mia and Landon together in a cafe near the heart of Mexico City. My first reaction was disbelief. I told myself it was a misunderstanding, that perhaps they were discussing business or an old memory. But a knot tightened in my chest, a premonition I could not ignore. I decided to confront the truth myself. I waited until Landon left for another business meeting, then drove to the cafe he frequented, my hands gripping the steering wheel as though it could steady my racing heart. The air smelled faintly of roasted coffee beans and the city after rain. I slipped inside, unnoticed at first, and there they were. Mia's laughter rang softly through the cafe, a sound that had once been comforting, now poison in my ears. Landon's hand brushed hers across the table, his eyes not meeting mine, his smile reserved for her. They didn't notice me at first, and perhaps that was a mercy I saw the man I loved, the man I had trusted with my heart, betray me in the gentlest, quietest way imaginable. I didn't scream. I didn't charge forward. I only watched, letting the scene etch itself into memory. Every whispered word, every subtle touch, was a wound that cut deeper than any harsh confrontation could. I realized then that betrayal doesn't always shout. Sometimes it tiptoes, leaving footprints that only the observant can follow. Returning to the mansion, my mind was a storm of disbelief and heartbreak. Alexander noticed the change immediately. He didn't ask at first. He didn't need to. Fathers, especially ones who have navigated power and influence, sense when their children or their future children-in-law are in pain. Later that evening, he called me into his office, the room bathed in the soft glow of amber lights, the scent of old books mingling with fine cigars. "Alexa," he said, his voice calm, measured. "You saw it." "I know you did. Landon has weaknesses I've known for some time, but I hoped it wouldn't reach this point. Sometimes, truth must be revealed, not to punish, but to awaken understanding." His words stung, but they were also grounding. Alexander was right. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a revelation of character, a mirror showing me a truth I had resisted seeing. That night, I confronted Landon, quietly, with the weight of certainty. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw accusations. I simply said, "I saw you with her. Every gesture, every smile, it's no longer a secret." He froze, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of me, but fear of what his own choices had wrought. "Alexa, It's complicated," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." "I trusted you," I said softly, almost a whisper myself, "and you chose her." Every 3 months, every excuse, every lie. It led to this moment. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the city outside. I realized then that confrontation didn't need drama to be devastating. Sometimes, quiet acknowledgement is sharper than any shout. Alexander joined us afterward, not as a judge, but as a guide. "People will fail you, Alexa," he said, "even the ones you love most. But their failures don't define you. What defines you is how you respond." And in that moment, I understood. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need anger. I needed clarity. I needed to reclaim myself, to step out of the shadow of betrayal with quiet strength. The mansion, once a symbol of beauty and grandeur, now felt like a stage of truth. I walked its halls, feeling the marble under my feet, noticing the delicate cracks in the walls I had ignored. Everything seemed sharper, more vivid. I understood that love, even when broken, could teach resilience. And betrayal, though painful, could awaken a depth of understanding I had never known. In the days that followed, the mansion felt both emptier and fuller at the same time. Emptier, because the warmth I once felt from Landon's presence had vanished. Fuller, because I began to notice myself again, to reclaim the quiet corners of my heart that had been consumed by doubt and pain. Landon tried to explain, to justify, to plead. But I had learned that explanations could no longer bridge the chasm that had opened between us. Every word he spoke seemed smaller than the silence that had settled around us. I realized that love, once broken by deceit, could not be mended with apologies alone. It demanded time, reflection, and a willingness to accept truth without illusion. Alexander remained my anchor. He didn't interfere, but his presence reminded me of the strength that came from within, and the wisdom to observe without succumbing to rage. "Alexa," he said one evening, as the sun dipped behind the Mexican hills, "your pain is valid, but your response is your power. Do not let betrayal define your life. Let it teach you the measure of your own heart." I began to spend my days walking through the gardens, letting the scent of orange blossoms and jasmine remind me that life continued and beauty persisted, even in sorrow. The city of Mexico stretched before me in vibrant colors, bustling with life, yet I felt a calm distance from its chaos. It was as though I had stepped outside the storm to watch it pass, my mind clear and my heart steady. Landon, on the other hand, seemed to shrink in the mansion he once inhabited with confidence. The realization of his choices weighed on him. I observed him not with anger, but with quiet detachment, a subtle shift in our dynamic that spoke louder than confrontation ever could. He understood, without my saying, that the trust we had built could not be reclaimed so easily. Mia disappeared from our lives as quietly as she had entered. Whether it was guilt, fear, or simply the impermanence of her role in Landon's life, I did not question it. The lesson had been taught. Some relationships are meant to illuminate truths, not endure forever. As weeks passed, I found solace in small rituals. Morning coffee in the sunlit garden. Quiet conversations with Alexander about business and life. Evenings spent with music flowing softly through the marble halls. I learned to appreciate silence, not as a void, but as a canvas for reflection. One evening, as the city lights of Mexico flickered outside my window, I wrote a letter I never sent to Landon. Not an accusation, not a plea, but a statement of clarity. I loved you, I trusted you, and I have been hurt. But I am learning that my worth is not tied to another's choices. I am enough. I am steady. I am free. I placed the letter aside, not for him, but for myself, a quiet testament to survival, to dignity, and to the understanding that sometimes letting go is the most powerful act of all. In the stillness of the mansion, I finally saw the beauty of my own resilience. The pain of betrayal, though sharp, had carved out a space for self-discovery. I realized that life, much like the gardens I walked each morning, required both sunlight and shadow. Without one, the other could not be fully appreciated. And though Landon remained a part of my past, his betrayal became a catalyst, not a chain. I understood the impermanence of some loves, the strength that comes from embracing truth, and the quiet power of rising above sorrow. The mansion, with all its grandeur, had taught me a lesson far greater than wealth or luxury. It had shown me that love, integrity, and self-respect are not commodities to be bought or traded. They are treasures cultivated in the heart, nurtured by patience, honesty, and courage. Years may pass, but some memories linger, not as wounds, but as quiet reminders of lessons learned. I often walk through the halls of the mansion, now filled with the gentle hum of life I have reclaimed, and I remember Landon not with anger, not with bitterness, but with the clarity of understanding. Love, I realized, is fragile. It cannot be forced or demanded. It cannot be measured by wealth, status, or convenience. And betrayal, though painful, does not define the one who is wronged. It only exposes the character of the one who chooses deceit. Alexander's presence, steady and calm, taught me that power is not in control or punishment, but in wisdom and patience. And Alexa, well, she was me, the self I nurtured and protected through silence and reflection. I found strength in moments that once felt empty, joy in simple rituals, and peace in the knowledge that I had not compromised my integrity. Landon eventually faded from my life, not as a villain in a story of revenge, but as a chapter in a book I now understood. His choices were his alone. My response, my responsibility. I chose dignity. I chose calm. I chose the quiet satisfaction of knowing that betrayal could never dictate my worth. I often walk in the gardens, the scent of jasmine and orange blossoms drifting in the air, sunlight casting gentle patterns on the marble paths. The city of Mexico stretches endlessly beyond, vibrant and alive, full of possibilities. And in those moments, I feel the depth of what I have gained, not through wealth or luxury, but through the resilience of a heart that has loved, suffered, and grown. Sometimes, I imagine Landon remembering me, wondering at the calm strength he once underestimated. But I do not dwell on it. I have learned that peace comes not from revenge, but from acceptance. That love, when true, endures in respect, kindness, and integrity, not in possession or deception. And so, I live quietly, fully, and with gratitude. For even in the shadows of betrayal, light persists. Even in heartbreak, understanding can bloom. And even in loss, the heart can find its way back to itself, stronger and wiser than before. In the end, wealth cannot measure the worth of love, nor can betrayal diminish the soul that remains steadfast. True strength lies in patience, in quiet dignity, and in the courage to rise above sorrow. And that is the lesson I carry with me every day, through the sunlit halls of the mansion, through the bustling streets of Mexico, and into the heart of every moment I have yet to live.